It's Soli in Las Vegas. It's my third day, my third episode of Conservative Coffee Talk. I've got the coffee right here. I'm drinking super coffee. I'm not endorsing this product officially. I like it. It's got a lot of caffeine and it helps you wake up in the morning. I'm in Southern Nevada on the west coast of the United States. Same time as Los Angeles. It's about 8:42 in the morning, and I wanted to just cover the news before we all get our day started. The whole point of this daily briefing is just to cover the main points of the news that I think are important. And I wanted to say hello to I want to say thank you to my followers by coming on here and saying hello to everybody, talking to you. You guys can see that I'm not a bot. I'm a real person. And I'm a podcaster. I'm a conservative podcaster here in Southern Nevada. And before I go into the bullet points for today, I just want to say there's a tragedy happening in real time right now. A commercial plane crashed with a military plane over the Potomac, just about 3 miles away from D.C. And as we're having this conversation, as we're going live right now, first responders and everyone are working on saving the people that are still alive and cleaning up the mess. I don't know enough about it to report on it or talk about it. I just know that it happened. It's happening right now. And if you turn on any news channel anywhere, that'll be the story right now. So God bless the people that are still alive, that are injured, that can get help. And we pray for the first responders and the firemen and the police and everyone that's helping to get those people to safety and get the crash cleaned up as soon as possible. So again, before I start off this conservative coffee talk, I want to say God bless the folks working on the Potomac air collision. It's happening right now in real time. Hey Wayne, thanks for joining me. Good morning, G-Dog West. How are you, Wayne? So this episode, I thought it's Throwback Thursday. I'm wearing the hat because this is a throwback. This goes back to 2016, guys. This red MAGA hat's now a throwback, so I thought I'd wear that. I've got some classic rock playing in the background. Jeffrey, Zach, how are you? User, bunch of numbers. What's going on? OC South, Lonnie, what's up? So this is my first Throwback Thursday doing conservative coffee talk. I just talked about what's happening in the Potomac right now, the air collision there. If you turn on any news network that you like to watch, you'll see that they're reporting about it. It's a tragedy. I hope people are alive. I hope they're able to help those people right away. And terrible thing that just happened, an air collision between a commercial airline and a military airline. It happened over the Potomac about 3 miles away from D.C. But what I wanted to talk about today is the will of the people versus the will of the government, the will of the state. And I've got three talking points that I want to talk about today. And I hope you guys are hey, I'm going to say hello to everybody. Good morning. Term limits. For the last 30, 40 years, everyone that's ever been polled on both sides, Democrat, Republican, and not only in the United States, in different Western countries, in the UK, in Australia, New Zealand, other Western countries, citizens want term limits for their politicians. Citizens believe in term limits. It does not make sense to have people in government positions, senators, congress people, for 30, 40, 50 years. I mean, Joe Biden, who's now out to political pasture, thank goodness, had been in politics for more than half a century. It doesn't make them better. It doesn't make them better at their jobs. It just makes them more compromised, right? So I think term limits, in terms of the will of the people, term limits have always been popular with voters in every Western country that I've ever tracked it in, and it's definitely very popular in this country with both Democrats and Republicans. 2 terms, maybe 3, that's enough. Go back to working in the real world. Go back to being a regular citizen. Career politicians don't make better politicians, and I would be hard pressed to find an argument to disprove that. Career politicians become more compromised. They become more. Well, I think that sums it up. They become more compromised over time because they've got to keep making different promises to different groups and keep delivering on them. So I think that in terms of the will of the people versus the will of the state, the will of the people lands very squarely in the term limits column. And finally, in my lifetime, I've never seen a president talk about term limits and talk about actually trying to enact a law and maybe even a constitutional amendment to get term limits put into the Constitution where it's the law of the land forever. I think it'd be a great thing for the country. I think bringing in fresh faces, fresh minds, fresh eyes every 4, 8 years is a fantastic thing. Presidents have term limits. Why shouldn't other politicians, other Congress people, other senators? It doesn't make sense to have people entrenched in these positions for 30, 40, 50 years because let's face it, corporations end up supporting them that entire time. You know what I'm trying not to say? It's just very easy to become compromised over time, and you stop thinking about the will of the people. You start worrying more about your own bottom line, your own personal success, and you stop caring about your constituents. You stop caring about the people that voted you into power, and you stop voting about the American people and their tax money, which we care a lot about. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about, was term limits. I'm so glad Trump's talking about it. I don't know where it is on the scale of his priorities with executive orders and getting it through Congress, but I do hope within the first 100 days, if this happens, this is earth-shattering, because again, people have been talking about term limits for my entire life, for 2 generations. Nothing's ever happened about it, because if you think about it, the people that have to enact the term limits are the people who will be affected by it. So of course they don't want there to be term limits, but the citizens do, and they work for us. And this America First movement that we got going on right now, I hope Trump uses the momentum of that movement to get the House and the Senate to pass a bill that puts term limits on senators and on Congress people. And if it has to be a constitutional amendment, let it be. That way it can't get changed again in the next administration or down the road if the Democrats get back in, which we hope that doesn't happen for a very long time. I'm saying hello to all the folks on here. Boomer, Sunday, Roy, Michael Moore. How are you, Anna? Good morning, Wesley, Omar Dex. This is my 3rd daily conservative coffee talk. I've got the coffee. I'm drinking super coffee. I'm not endorsing this product. I'm just saying it's got a big kick to it. So I like it a lot. I like the mocha flavor. And if you guys if you're coffee drinkers, grab a cup of Joe, not Joe Biden, and join me. That was the first thing. Term limits. The second bullet point that I wanted to talk about today, briefly, is the border and what's happening at the border. I did a lot of research on this before I came on today to talk to you guys about it, but it's staggering what's changed in the border over time. In 2008, George Bush's last term in office as president, 8,000 unaccompanied minors crossed over the border. These are kids, average age of about 13, that showed up at the border and said they had nowhere to go, nowhere to be, no parental support. And of course, we took them in because they're unaccompanied children. That was in 2008. In 2022, it was 149,000 children, unaccompanied minors between the ages of 10 and 13. When Joe Biden left office, there were over 300,000 children that were just lost. They couldn't account for them at all. Now that Trump's in office, they're digging into the details, or they're digging into the numbers, and this is what they found out. There's an office called the ORR, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and under oath, talking to Senator Hawley late last year, the director of that department admitted that they can only account for about 1/3 of these children in terms of them getting rehoused with American families. 2/3 of that number, over 300,000 children, they can't account for. They don't know where they are. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how they're being treated. They don't know if they're working in labor camps or worse. I don't want to even say what the worst part of it is, but you guys can imagine what might be happening to young children with no parental guidance at all, who they might end up with. That's happening right now. That, to me, is a man-made humanitarian crisis. If you're going to have an open border policy, previous administration, at least make sure the kids land somewhere safe. That didn't happen. And that's one of Trump's priorities right now, is to make sure that happens. As you probably heard a few days ago, Tom Homan and his team have found about 80,000 of these children already. Within the first 4 or 5 days, they found about 80,000 of these over 300,000 children who have come into the country unaccompanied, and they're between the ages of 10 and 13. So I hope that we find all of them. I hope they get housed immediately and taken care of. Nobody, left or right, wants unaccompanied minors to be getting exploited for any reason. I hope that we can agree on that. So in terms of the will of the people and the will of the government, the people, us, want these kids to be taken care of course. And this government is doing something about it immediately. The previous one just left the borders open, and I don't, if they were doing things to help these kids, to help find them, I wasn't aware of it. Again, I'm not an expert, and what I'm saying today is for educational and entertainment purposes only, but I didn't hear much news about the Biden and Harris administration looking for these kids and doing anything to stop them from coming in unaccompanied. That's the solution, to seal the border and then have solutions at the border to help these kids get to services that they need there, without letting them come into the country and just No one knows where they're ending up, which is not a good thing when you're that young, that impressionable, and that vulnerable. So that to me is the second will of the people versus the will of the government. People, average people, Americans, left, right. We don't want kids, our kids, anyone's kids, to be lost in the system and completely on their own in a country this big, where there are lots of people that don't have their best interests at heart. Let's put it that way. So the first thing was term limits. The second thing was the border. And by the way, just for a bit of history, more coffee. I'm slowing down. More coffee. I did a little bit of history on this, and during COVID, there was a Title 42 was put into place, and what Title 42 said was that no adults could come in, no migrant adults could come into the United States during COVID because of the pandemic, but unaccompanied minors were still allowed to come in because they're children and they had nowhere to go. So we let them come into the country, tested or not. That's why the number is so big. I wondered, how did it get to over 300,000 children? Because during COVID, the coyotes and the people that get people from outside the U.S. into the United States for a fee were able to get kids to come through, because the law, Title 42, allowed children to come into the country, but not adults, while the COVID pandemic was still raging in the United States. So children were allowed to come in record numbers. So they did. That's why in 2022, 149,000 children, unaccompanied, between the ages of 10 and 13, came into the country. And again, the ORR, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, can only account for a third of those kids. Not good stuff. So I think in this instance, the will of the people and the will of the new government, the Trump administration, unite. We want to find these kids, we want to get them the help they need, and make sure they're not being exploited in any way. Finally, my last point for today's conservative coffee talk is the hostages. I'm old enough to remember when Ronald Reagan came into office, and one of the reasons he won was because of the hostage situation in Tehran. It had been over, I don't know how long it had been, but a lot of Americans had been held hostage for a long time by the Iranian government. And Americans were in an uproar about it. The media talked about it almost every day. We had countdowns. There was a real movement in the country to get these people home safely. Well, as you guys are, I'm sure, as you folks are probably well aware, we've had hostages taken by Hamas on October 7th of last year. Over 100 of them, about a dozen of them who were American citizens, who are just now starting to come home. On the last day of Joe Biden, I'm saying hello to folks on the chat, by the way. I'm saying hello to folks. Richard, Scott, Knuckle, how are you? Wind, Larry, Doug. So on the last day of Joe Biden's administration, the last day, they finally started to physically get hostages to come back from Palestine, from where they're being held by Hamas in Gaza. But why wasn't, I'm just, in terms of the will of the people and the will of the government, how was the previous government allowed to not be under more scrutiny for that? I mean, why wasn't there a bigger push to get some kind of negotiated release of these people? It just didn't happen. We talked about Ukraine a lot, and we talked about, paying off student loans a lot, but these hostages sat, and they were being held by terrorists for a year. I'm sure it wasn't an awesome experience. And it's very surprising to me that the will of the people, us, Americans, we wanted to bring these folks home immediately, and the government just ignored our wishes. Well, that's changed now, thank goodness. The day before Trump came into office, we started to physically get hostages back into the United States. As a matter of fact, at Trump's inauguration on January 20th, 2025, right behind him were some families of hostages that had been released like the day before. Super powerful to see that. And good for the Trump administration. Again, I don't know what the Biden administration was doing in terms of the hostages, but I remember a time when that would have been a huge, much more covered topic in the media and the news. It would have been a much more important issue and at the forefront of politics. But under the last administration, do you remember? Maybe I'm wrong, guys. Chime in and let me know. But I don't remember any press meetings or any press secretary talking about their plans to bring the hostages home. It just wasn't a priority. It wasn't talked about enough. Anytime I'm saying hello to folks. Hey, Jerry. Hey, Miguel. anytime Americans and other people get held hostage by terrorist groups, I would hope that moving forward, that would be a priority for any administration, anyone in power. I mean, these are American citizens and other citizens being held by murderers. So those are the three things I wanted to talk about today on Conservative Coffee Talk. I wanted to say hello this is our first Throwback Thursday. I'm wearing the throwback MAGA hat. I'm drinking some coffee. I'm having a cup of Joe, not Joe Biden. I started this off by giving a shout out to the folks in the Potomac right now. As we're having this conversation, as we're going live, there's been a terrible plane crash between a commercial airline and a military airline, and they crashed. I don't know how that's possible, how the radar didn't catch it or whatever, but I don't know enough about the story to comment on it, except to say that it's happening right now. So when you get off the chat, if you want to turn on your TVs or your radios or however you listen to news or whatever outlets you follow, I'm sure they're talking about it right now, and they'll tell you the moment to moment what's happening with it. But it's a big story, it's a tragedy, and I hope everyone that is alive gets back home safely, and I hope they're able to clean that up and maybe put in some measures to make it not happen again in the future. I don't know why it happened or how it even could happen, but it did. Hey Boomer, hey Libby, hey Catherine. So today was the will of the people versus the will of the government. I talked about term limits. Americans have always wanted them. DC politicians don't like it. Trump's the first president that I know who talked about it on the campaign trail. He's been talking about it since he got in office. That's a really good thing. It would serve our country much better to have people serve 1, 2, maybe 3 terms and then get out, go back to the private sector, be regular people. Because once you're in the DC environment for too long, you become compromised. History shows that, left and right. So I hope term limits gets passed. I hope the will of the people wins this time around, and Trump's able to get term limits passed. I talked about the border. I gave you some interesting information about what's going on there and why, and how we can all agree that unaccompanied children between the ages of 10 and 13 should be our country's priority, to find these kids and get them safe. I hope we can all agree on that, no matter what our political affiliation is or how we feel about Trump. That's not really the point here. The point is getting these kids to safety and hopefully putting in policies at the border that stops this from happening and stops this from continuing. And finally, the hostage situation, the fact that the Biden administration, I'm not saying they didn't do anything, but I'm not aware of what they were doing because the media didn't talk about it. The White House press secretary didn't talk about it that much. They would just say they're in negotiations. Well, a year is a long time to let people be held hostage, especially Americans and other citizens. So, as I said before, I'm old enough to remember when that changed an election, and that Jimmy Carter lost because Ronald Reagan was able to get the hostages home from Tehran a long time ago. Well, here we are, it's been over a year, and finally, one day before Trump became president, hostages started to come back to the United States. Of course, Joe Biden tried to take credit for it, but we know it was Trump and Trump's peace through strength effect. So, to wrap this thing up, happy Throwback Thursday. Throw on some cool tunes. This is my Throwback Thursday MAGA hat. This is almost 10 years old now, guys. If you can remember, if you can believe it. This is from like 2015, 2016. So it's a throwback. Coffee, always, to get the day started here. I'm in Southern Nevada, and it's going on 9 o'clock. So I'm going to sign off. Thanks so much for listening. I'm going to come to you every day and give you these briefs just to kind of to talk to fellow conservatives, let you know that I appreciate you following me here on TikTok and on the other socials. I really do appreciate your kind attention. And we're all in this together, left and right. I hope the left comes on board with the America First policies. It's going to make everyone's life better. And I hope the will of the people always continues to win over the will of the government, because they work for us. Happy Throwback Thursday. Thank you for your kind attention. Please follow me here. I've got a podcast as well. It's called PatriotsOnlyPlease.com. 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 Please like, comment, share, subscribe. Soli in Las Vegas out. Have a fantastic Throwback Thursday. And please say a prayer for the people in the Potomac right now in D.C. There's a terrible plane crash that happened just moments ago between a commercial airliner and a military airliner, and that's happening right now in real time. So we pray for those folks. We pray for the folks in California. We pray for all the folks back east and all those states hit by the hurricane, that they get the relief and aid they need and they get their lives back in order as soon as possible. And I thank you guys for your kind attention. Have a great Thursday. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Conservative Coffee Talk. Soli out. Keep on trumping.